One of the most underrated fragrances from Xerjoff is also, surprise, surprise, one of my favorites. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I'm Daniel. Today we're talking fragrances, and this is a practical review of Xerjoff Zefiro. These reviews are for fragrances that I have a lot of experience with, multiple wears and mix situations, and are meant to give you a general idea of what it feels to wear the fragrance. As per usual, despite doing a lot of research before buying fragrances, I'm not really into going into details about notes and accords, as I don't think they help the end user. I'd rather talk about the wear experience as a whole. Yes, we're back with another Xerjoff review. This one here is actually one of my favorites from the house. Funnily enough, some of you guys are really questioning why I keep giving Xerjoff a chance and why I keep featuring them on my channel, despite it being pretty clear that I'm not a fan of the house. Some other of you guys are actually very critical of how harsh I am towards Xerjoff as a house. I don't know, maybe it's me, maybe I'm conveying the wrong type of message. But I really like Xerjoff as a house, and I really want to give them all the chances that they can get. Trust me, if I didn't like Xerjoff as a house, I wouldn't keep buying fragrances, I wouldn't keep acquiring bottles, and I wouldn't keep sampling samples. And you would know very upfront and center if the house wasn't for me. Yes, my relationship with the Xerjoff house has been a little bit hit or miss. A lot of their fragrances start off really fun. I'm very enthusiastic about the opening. I'm very enthusiastic the first days I smell them. And then some of them get kind of boring. The wow effect that I get upon initial spray kind of fades off. And again, not to repeat myself again and again and again, and not to beat that dead horse to death again. A lot of the fragrances, especially the ones that are perfumed by Chris Maurice, aka Chris Carbonell, they all kind of dry down to the same sort of thing. It's a very recognizable scent DNA. It's a very recognizable Xerjoff DNA. And what I'm talking about is this vanilla, musky, ambery type of dry down, which again is very successful. It's actually a very good dry down for a mass appealing scent, but ultimately it doesn't offer much nuance. And when a lot of fragrances dry down to the same thing, it kind of gets boring. That being said, I do applaud Xerjoff for what they are, what they represent. I do applaud their enthusiasm towards fragrances in general and the way they convey their entrepreneurship towards the fragrance market. Yes, they have some shady tactics, but overall, I feel that Xerjoff in the fragrance community has been a net positive because they do elevate fragrances to the next level. They do really facilitate the concept of luxury. And it's just fun. It's just a fun house that brings relatively innovative ideas. Now that that massive intro / disclaimer is out of the way, let's get into the meat and potatoes of Zefiro. As I mentioned in my introduction, Zefiro is one of the most underrated fragrances from the house of Xerjoff and is actually one of my favorites. And I say underrated because unfortunately for Zefiro, it's part of the 1861 collection, which is the one that is inspired by Italy and Italian cities. And two of the biggest sellers for Xerjoff are also part of that collection, namely Naxos and Renaissance. And that means that the other two offerings that are present in that collection, again, Zefiro and the other one being Decas, really fly under the radar and live in the shadows of the two bestsellers. As I mentioned, the 1861 collection is inspired by Italian environments and cities. Zefiro is inspired by the city of Rome. And if you know me, I'm actually originally from Rome. Now I live in Switzerland, but I am through and through a Roman Italian. So this one here actually struck a chord with me, not because it really conveyed me the image of Rome per se, but we'll get to that in the scent profile, but rather I was quite attracted to the idea of a fragrance being inspired by Rome, and specifically the churches of Rome. As you may also know, incense is one of my favorite notes, if not my favorite. So again, Zefiro seemed insanely attractive, and I really wanted to give it a try. And before you ask, I have tried the rest of the 1861 collection. Naxos is a very good fragrance objectively. It's a little bit overdone, it's a little bit overhyped, and I don't really like to go with the hype stuff, but it's objectively a good fragrance. Renaissance is the one that I have the least amount of experience with. I quickly sampled it, it seemed pretty good, but again, I was kind of put off by the fact that the dry down seemed more of the same. The most interesting one to me is Zefiro, and actually Decas is also very intriguing because it features a combination of spices and citruses. It's actually really underrated. And the reason why I don't own Decas is actually really silly and petty. It all comes down to the fact that I just don't like the way the bottle looks. Those stripes on the bottle, the Italian stripes, just don't vibe with me. and it just kind of looks dumb. So I liked the clean satin look of Zefiro. I like the clean satin look of Naxos and Renaissance. Another massive reason for my attraction towards Zefiro is actually the perfumers for this fragrance. This one here is not perfumed by Chris Maurice. This one here is perfumed by Robertet and Mathieu Nardin. And it really shows. This smells nothing like the other Xerjoff creations. Yes, there is some underlying Xerjoff DNA in this. There's also a little bit of an underlying mass appealingness that affects Zefiro, but in this case, it works out for the best because combining that with weird and eccentric top notes makes for a really interesting product, which is actually quite approachable, but still being very, very unique and wearable. And this is ultimately why I think Zefiro is one of Xerjoff's best fragrances, because it really combines innovation with wearability, with mass appealingness to a degree. It's really, really interesting, and I really applaud the house for this. I like this fragrance a lot. But back to the inspiration for Zefiro. This, as I mentioned, is inspired by Rome and the churches of Rome. And the main detectable items in here, the main detectable ingredients are churchy incense in a very specific, very interesting white wine accord. It kind of works out. It doesn't really remind me of the churches of Rome. And although I'm not a churchy person whatsoever, I barely even went to a mass. I have visited the various churches in Rome. I was basically a tourist guide for all of my relatives and friends. And although I'm not necessarily transported back to Rome every time I wear this fragrance, I still think that the wear experience is very unique. It's super fresh, it's very mass appealing, and overall very, very pleasurable. But we're going to talk about the scent profile and wear experience after we cover the presentation. As you may know by now, the presentation for Xerjoff products is basically second to none. I got this bottle in a trade a while back. I got it without a box. The boxes for Xerjoff are those infamous coffin style boxes. Not really that great. They do convey a sense of opulent luxury, but at the same time, they come across as a little bit kitsch and over the top. I'm actually glad I don't have the box, because every time I get a Xerjoff, I feel the need to hoard a box just because it's so expensive. And this is one of the most beautiful Xerjoff fragrances in my collection as far as looks goes and as far as presentation goes. Not only because I'm a huge sucker for satin frosted presentations, which are super fingerprint repellent and allow me to handle the bottle with ease and without fuss, but also because the presentation is actually quite unique. On the back, you have a beautiful transparent engraving, which actually adds a lot to the presentation. This engraving is actually unique to the 1861 collection, so also Naxos, Renaissance, and Decas have it. But it's a nice touch, and I think it really adds a lot of value to the presentation overall. It feels insanely luxurious. The bottles themselves for Xerjoff fragrances are pretty much flawless. The fragrances from the 1861 collection actually only come in 100 mLs, and for whatever reason, they're some of the cheaper fragrances from the offering. I'm not complaining or anything like that. I just don't understand really why. It took me a while to even purchase Naxos because it really looked weird next to my other 50 ml bottles. Then I kind of resigned to the chaos and I embraced Zefiro fully. It's beautiful. The plaque is really, really well made. The labeling here is perfectly stuck on. It's not even a sticker, it's just kind of painted on. Absolutely gorgeous. Again, flawless presentation, no seams, it's perfect. The cap for Zefiro is your usual Xerjoff cap. It's your usual Xerjoff ferrule head. Very heavy, very well made, super shiny. The atomizer assembly for Xerjoff fragrances is some of the best in the game. It has the best compromise between very diffusive and easy to aim, and it sprays a ton of liquid. It's an absolute joy to use. Let's give it a couple sprays. I've been using this fragrance as my scent of the day. When it comes to pricing, Zefiro is actually very, very fair. As I mentioned, this is one of the most unpopular ones from the 1861 collection, and you can easily find this at discounters for about $100, maybe 120. Naxos goes for a little bit more, maybe 160, but this one here is easy to find. And if you're even willing to go to the secondhand market, if you're willing to compromise on the presentation, like without the box, you can easily get this for about 70 to 90 bucks. It's a really, really good deal. Overall, presentation for Zefiro is pretty much faultless. Not only is Xerjoff itself at the top of the game when it comes to presentation, but Zefiro and the 1861 collection to me is basically the best that Xerjoff has to offer. Okay, time to talk about the scent profile and wear experience for Xerjoff Zefiro. What does this actually smell like? Zefiro is first and foremost a light incense fragrance. It has a weird type of opening that I mentioned before with a white wine accord. The base of this fragrance is a little bit more mass appealing. It features sweeter notes that really help round everything together. It has some honey, it has some vanillas, it has some resins. It's a resinous balsamic experience, which is actually quite fresh and light. You can easily pull this off year round. The tonal range for Zefiro is also very, very good. It has high highs with the acidity from the white wine accord and from the citruses that really give it a zing and an energy, but it also has a deep rumbling bass with those honey notes, those vanillas, and those resins. It's really beautiful. It never goes too dark. It's never cloying. It's very, very wearable, again, while staying unique and characterful. The opening of Zefiro is definitely dominated by that white wine accord. It's easily the most recognizable part of this fragrance. That white wine accord is quite unique. It's very photorealistic. Everyone that smells this scent can easily pick up on wine. It's not too over the top, it's not too pungent, it's not too weird, it's actually quite likable. And it has a mixture of bitterness and acidity that really helps cut through the incense smoke that is also presented in the opening. This comes across as very fresh, very uplifting, very zingy, and very energetic. There's also some citruses that help round everything off. I'm not really sure which citruses they are, but they're not overly sour, they're not overly bright. Everything is just incredibly smooth while still being very energetic and zingy. This is a really nice opening and it's definitely a nose catcher. I don't think that this is designed to be a very transitioning fragrance. The evolution of the scent is in typical Xerjoff fashion, pretty predictable and very, very smooth, which aids to the wear experience. Yes, there is some change top to bottom. Those acidic notes from the white wine accord and from those citruses that give that beautiful zing and energy, they fade off after about an hour and they leave place to other stuff, namely florals. They're very minty, they're still very fresh. This scent is again fresh throughout its wear experience. It's very beautiful and very light. I really like how this sits on skin. It's never cloying, it's never oily, it's never heavy. Anyway, those florals, I'm not really sure what they are. There might be some rose, there might be some geranium. And I'm saying this because there's a little bit of metallicness, there's a little bit of mintiness that kind of just keeps this fragrance kind of floating off your skin. It's very, very pretty. And deep down in the dry down, basically the scent loses also that sort of zing, and it really sinks down to its final form, which is a very wispy, very smoky type of incense. The incense smoke in here is never bitter, it's never burnt. It's always very white, very soft, and very cloud-like. And in the bottom, you get resins, you get, again, the frankincense, you get maybe a little bit of patchouli. There's also an underlying sweetness, maybe from the honey, maybe from some other stuff that I'm not really aware of, that helps the palatability of the scent. Again, it's never bitter, it's never off-putting. It's really nice, but still has a ton of character. And if you know me, I don't really like talking about notes, but for this fragrance specifically, I don't really get much other than that white wine accord and that very beautifully balanced incense. Everything is just so beautifully put together and balanced, as I said, balanced and smooth. The scent definitely lacks a little bit of depth and 3D effect like most amouages have and most Les Indemodables have. You can really easily point out the ingredients in amouage, you can really point out how it's made. This comes across as a more unified wall of scent. It's never flat, it never really goes paper thin. It has some density, it has some heft. It feels like a cloud, a fog. When you put your nose in there though, everything you smell is kind of just mixed together and it comes to you as one smell. It's really beautiful, and again, it's just calming to a degree. You really don't have to think much about this. It's a Xerjoff after all. It wears easy, it wears smooth. Although this is probably one of the easiest entries to incense as a note, you have to somewhat still enjoy incense to appreciate Zefiro. Otherwise, you're gonna just be put off by the churchiness of it. This really conveys me images of tranquility, maybe like an empty sort of church with this incense smoke that is undisturbed, and it kind of just floats up into the air and disperses very, very gently, very quietly. This is a very, very quiet type of scent. It's not loud, it's very relaxed, and it perfectly suits my personality. And actually, speaking of, it's really interesting how some scents are so compliant with someone's personality. I feel that most amouages also work perfectly for me, and that's why I'm such a fan of them, because they also convey this sort of sense of tranquility and relaxation. Everything is just serene and really elegant and quiet. A lot of other Xerjoff fragrances, namely the Velvet Collection and some of the most popular loud fragrances, are definitely not like that. They're grating, they're screechy, they're a little bit too much for me. This one here perfectly suits a very quiet type of environment. And that being said, I have worn this in many situations, from the gym to the office. I've worn this a lot. And actually, now that I'm noticing it, there's a significant dent in this bottle, which just shows how much I've been enjoying and wearing this thing. I really want to talk about again how this fragrance perfectly merges uniqueness, character, and mass appealingness, because this is probably the biggest achievement of this fragrance. Again, it takes notes which are not super popular, incense and white wine, especially in the Xerjoff realm, especially within the mass appealing type of realm, and combines it with a very smooth, very wearable type of base note. Overall, this scent really manages to capture uniqueness and presents all this in a way that is very easy to understand, is still quite likable, understated, but still bold at the same time. This is one of the best design fragrances that I've came across lately. It's just such a well put together product, and that's why I regard this as one of Xerjoff's best fragrances. This perfectly represents the innovation yet mass appealingness of the brand of Xerjoff. When it comes to practicalities, as you may be guessing, Zefiro strikes extremely high. Starting off with performance, Xerjoff is always known for their massive performance, and Zefiro does not disappoint. It lasts a super long time. I get a full days of wear, and I can smell it around me, kind of like whiffing in and out of my nose, all the way down to the deepest dry down, which is basically 10 hours later. The projection on this is not super loud, it's pretty mild. You can easily wear this in public from hour one. Immediately after you spray it, it's not overly powerful. And actually the transition between the projection phase and the skin set phase is super smooth and really mild. When it comes to versatility and use cases, Zefiro does not disappoint, granted that you like incense. This is a very unique, light and fresh wear experience that is also deep enough to go 4 seasons. This can be easily a signature scent. For whatever reason, I have my restrictions with wearing incense on a day-to-day basis. Maybe because I don't want to pass as the churchy incense guy, but I do like incense a lot, so I could definitely pull this off on a daily basis and signature scent it. It's also priced really well for a signature scent. It's not too stupid expensive that you worry all the time while wearing it. And I don't know, it just really strikes the perfect balance. When it comes to use cases, I feel this goes easily casual to elegant. You can wear this in pretty much every situation. Again, I wore this to the gym. Not its best environment. The smoky resinous aspect of this can be a little bit heavy. I don't mind it. I really like incense. It's very well balanced with that fresh top and that fresh citrusy zing that you also get deep in the dry down due to that LME resin type of thing. But overall, I don't know, incense, again, I said that this is a very tranquil, very relaxed type of scent. It doesn't really go well with high heartbeat, high intensity type of environments like the gym. Apart from the gym, this goes pretty much everywhere. I've worn this at the office many times, today included. No one better than I. It's really beautiful, and I feel that in the air, the heavy churchy aspect of this fades off well, and it comes across as a very unique type of balsamic smokiness. It's not cloying or heavy whatsoever. Worst case scenario, it might come across as a little bit new age, but if you're okay with that, by all means, wear this at the office to your heart's content. Overall, I feel that this, again, is perfectly suitable even for evening scenarios. It's fresh but heavy. It just really works year-round in every situation. This is one of the most versatile, unique scents that I have. When it comes to demographics, again, I feel that the limiting factor here is the incense note. I really don't associate youthfulness to incense. A lot of young people are put off by the churchy vibes, but if you can get past that incense or you like it, this can be probably worn by any age and is completely, absolutely unisex. Again, I really can't stress enough how wearable and how versatile this is, given how unique it is at the same time. And actually, this is the aspect which I wanted to lean on for my fragrance options. I decided to go with fresh, unique fragrances. So yes, we are in the fragrance options section for my reviewed fragrance. And as I mentioned, I decided to go for the fresh, unique approach. These are all fragrances that are fresh, they're wearable year-round, they're quite powerful, they have a deep base, but they're also unique in wear experience. They're also very characterful. The first one that I want to present you is Dior Eau Sauvage Parfum. This one here is a 2017 edition. I got this relatively recently. It's an absolutely beautiful scent. This definitely leans a little bit more masculine. It leans a little bit more barbershop. The beautiful opening of this is incredibly citrusy, incredibly zingy, incredibly vibrant. It feels clean. The very astringent, sour, realistic bergamot feels even more clean than it is because, again, it's aided by a lavender note that kind of gives this barbershop feel. It's a really unique thing. It's absolutely beautiful. It's one of the best designers I've tried and one of the best designers out there, especially considering how relatively affordable this is. You definitely do not need to go into the high-end designer realm like Louis Vuitton to get something that is high quality and very, very wearable. This is an absolute masterpiece. I enjoy wearing this. And the unique factor of this, the unique staying power of this relies on the resinous dry down, which is not too dissimilar from Zefiro. Rather, there's no incense in here, but it has the same sort of a dry, citrusy, kind of fresh resin to it, which really sticks around your skin for a very, very long time. Again, I can't recommend Dior Eau Sauvage enough. This is a beautiful fragrance that will probably stay in my repertoire for a very, very long time. The second fragrance that I want to showcase is another one that is quickly becoming one of my favorites. It's another relatively recent acquisition. This one here is Etro Messe de Minuit. Now, the name of this fragrance literally translates to midnight mass, so you would think that it's a very dark, very heavy type of scent. But this is super unique in wear experience, and despite it being an eau de toilette, it's incredibly long lasting. The unique aspect of this very particular incense fragrance is the opening. This opens up with some of the most beautiful, sweet citruses out there. This is a very bright, very uplifting, very cheerful, very festive type of incense. It does not come across as churchy whatsoever. The smokiness in here is very reminiscent of Zefiro, actually. It's even lighter to a degree. It's never burnt, it's never heavy. You never really picture a church. I more picture a festival, like a town festival, like a very folkloristic type of festival. It's absolutely beautiful. It lasts forever. As I mentioned, despite it being an eau de toilette, I don't know what's in here, but the performance in this is absolutely nuclear. And when you spray this for the first time, I challenge you to hold emotions back. You're going to be wide-eyed because you're going to be definitely not expecting this beautiful mandarin, orange, this sweet lemon. Everything is just so perfectly balanced. It's not as well balanced and smooth as Zefiro, but it's super exciting. It's a super unique take on incense, and I really, really like this fragrance. Etro is an absolutely underrated house. I definitely suggest you get your hands on this. Even just a sample, it's actually quite cheap. I think I got this for 75 bucks. Really, really great stuff. My last fragrance option is my usual oddball of the bunch. This one here does not really go resinous or incensey. We're talking about Dodo 2020 edition or Dodo 2. And this is a very particular type of perfume because it starts off fresh. Again, this is a very fresh fragrance overall, but it starts off fresh, fruity. It opens up with a citrus that kind of reminds me of grapefruit for whatever reason. And it even gets sweeter down the road. Now, the particularity of this fragrance is the heavy, musky base. This is a borderline sweaty type of musk. It kind of reminds me of bergamasque, but a little bit more complex. Bergamasque, as the name implies, features that very astringent, very bitter, very sour type of bergamot with an incredibly simple base. It's just basically sweatiness. And it's very beautiful. I really like it, but this elevates that scent profile and it brings a lot more complexity and smoothness. Again, we have that very beautifully fruity, kind of fresh, zingy opening. And then the muskiness in this is a combination of musk and I think there's a little bit of cumin here. It really lends to this not sweaty vibe, but it really contrasts a lot with the opening because the opening comes across as exceedingly fresh and clean. And it really highlights how musky the base is. This is a really unique fragrance. It has bad ratings on Fragrantica and Parfumo for whatever reason. I think that the reported stinkiness of Dodo is grossly overrated. I'm definitely not saying to go blind by it because you have to sample this because it might not be for everyone. But again, Zoologist is a super fun house. They have my full support. And if you're into the house of Zoologist, if you like the concept that I've been describing, give it a chance. It's a really fun scent. But back to Xerjoff Zefiro with my final recommendations and overview. Now, you know where I stand. I absolutely love this fragrance. This is one of the best fragrances from the house of Xerjoff, in my opinion. It really strikes the perfect balance between character, uniqueness, wearability, mass appealingness, just ease of wear. Everything is really relaxed. Sometimes, although incense is deemed to be a very relaxing note, I like to wear quite challenging incense fragrances. And trust me, wearing a Filippo Sorcinelli to work is not the most relaxing experience ever. I do get somewhat self-conscious of how loud it is and how bold it is. This one here actually perfectly scratches my incense itch while still making myself not too obnoxious, not too overwhelming to others. This is a very beautiful incense fragrance, and it's actually my first incense recommendation to those getting into the incense scent profile. It's one of the easiest to wear. It's not cloying. It's really nice. It's so well balanced. I really like this scent. I just can't get over how much I highly regard this. And if it's not clear enough, get yourself at least a sample of Zefiro. It's really sad that it's overshadowed by Naxos and Renaissance. I'm definitely not one of those people that likes to gatekeep fragrances. I'm not one of those people that says, good that it's underrated, so only I can wear it. No, I want people to understand what Xerjoff is capable of, because this is one of their best creations. Yes, it's not the most complex, it's not the most daring, it's not the most extreme, but overall, it's actually quite difficult to pull something like this off, to combine such unique ingredients and such a likable scent profile. I really recommend it. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It always helps the channel and it's massively appreciated. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. It's never taken for granted. Once again, see you in the next review. Many more to come. See ya and cheers.